sorry we're getting started a few minutes late, but we can go a few minutes extra at the end.
All right, I've got a hand up. You want to go for it?
Right, just before we do, before my favorite South Carolinian asks his first questions, a couple of things. For all of you who are on the webinar, and I assume that's most, if not all of you, I need to echo something that Richard said at the close. I didn't have a chance to tell the broader group, but our brand new communication specialist, Brianna, today was her first solo effort running the drill, and she was great.
Thank you.
I want to thank her for everything she did.
Thank you so much.
Well, no, even though Maddie now has a new job and a new life and almost a new home, she's volunteering her time to help us with these programs. And so, Maddie, thank you very much for staying involved. It really means a lot to all of us.
Oh, of course. I love hanging with our group. No,
I've been doing this webinar for 5.5 years, but this is the first time I have ever had so much terrific work done with me and for me by our amazing intern. And if you guys look around the chat room, you see a young woman by the name of Nathalie Yacoub here. Natalie is a graduate student at Annenberg, and I can't tell you how much time and effort she put in to help me get ready for this week. So Natalie, thank you very much.
Of course, I'm happy to help.
Okay. All right, now we can get started. Yeah.
Hey, Roger, you're welcome to kick it off.
Okay. Yeah, boy, you sure generated a lot of questions in my mind. It was great discussion. Maybe the first one, or one I'll ask, is about tariffs. Could Europe be possibly just waiting for the U.S. courts to overthrow the tariffs?
I think that's part of their calculation, because they don't believe that the U.S. president has this kind of authority. That said, I think much of the European leadership has been disappointed by the U.S. judicial system in the past. So I don't think they want to bank too heavily on that decision going against Trump. So Roger, I think you're right. I think that was a contributing factor, but I honestly believe that more than anything else, that Europe gave Trump so much of what he wanted on trade in order to get more out of them, or at least more of his time and attention on Ukraine. The economic stuff is high stakes. The survival of Europe arguably is greater.
Okay, thanks.
Wonderful. And I saw the question in the chat come through first. John, do you want to ask it or do you want me to?
You can go ahead.
Okay. All right. John's question is, are Americans going to associate tariffs with a tax increase without increasing income taxes directly?
So to this point, Americans have not yet equated tariffs with a tax increase. That said, Trump's approval numbers on economic issues are much, much lower than they were in January. So even if voters aren't making that direct one to the next connection, they are getting a general sense that this isn't what he promised them in the election last year. But as I mentioned at the very close of the webinar, we are just beginning to see the first more clear signs of the tariffs impacting not just importers and businesses, but impacting consumers. And when you do see those prices start to go up, particularly on food and on gasoline, then I think voters will draw the line much more directly from tariffs to taxes. Up until now, where that relationship has been strongest is on housing prices. And while nobody likes paying a lot for housing, most people don't buy a house every month. So while it has an important impact on the economy, it's not a recurring burden to consumers. Whereas groceries, whereas gasoline, whereas electricity has a much more direct and ongoing impact. So I think that's when you'll begin to see the connection much more strongly in the eyes of the voters.
Thank you. And then Randy, I see your hand up next.
I had a question about Trump and his internal associates have been able to maintain being Teflon through this entire administration. Do you think that will continue all the way through until the midterms, or do you think that there could be a bump in the road that is significant enough to shake the MAGA around him?
Well, to me, there are a few things that could shake Trump's hold on MAGA. One is U.S. engagement overseas. I think it's one of the reasons he's so focused on ending the Ukraine war and trying to end the Gaza war, because he knows his base doesn't like this at all. The economic burden could probably have some impact, but probably to a lesser degree. I have to believe, though, that even while very few people will vote next November based on Jeffrey Epstein, I do believe that the Epstein scandal and the suspicion among Trump's strongest supporters that there is a cover-up going on, I think that has the potential to weaken Trump's hold on this group in a way that no matter public policy can. It's not a kitchen table issue. It's not what's going to drive most people to the polls next November. But Trump's support, all the way back to 2015, has been less about matters of specific public policy, even immigration, than it has been the way he has capitalized and co-opted on this general anger and outrage toward the establishment. The idea that the elites are playing by different rules than the rest of us. And the Epstein scandal, the Justice Department's mishandling of it, and Trump's, at least to date, unwillingness to be more forthcoming, I think has the potential to undermine the MAGA nation's faith in him in a way that a simple matter of public policy can't. I would just add really quickly before the next question. As I think some of you have seen, there is a bipartisan effort, obviously a lot more Democrats than Republicans, but there's a bipartisan effort in the House to enact what's called a discharge petition when the House comes back from its recess next month. And a discharge petition says that if an absolute majority of House members, 218 members of the House of Representatives, wants a bill to come to the floor, that it does come to the floor, even if the Speaker or the House majority doesn't want it to. And all it takes is a handful of House Republicans to join with unanimous Democrats, presumably, to sign a discharge petition. And all of a sudden, the House of Representatives is voting and offering injunctions on every aspect of the Epstein scandal, which I think could do Trump immense political damage.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. I do see Rick's question in the chat. Rick, do you want to come on and ask it? I can do it if not. I'll be still in here. That's all right. I can do it.
I can ask it.
Yes, go for it.
Rick?
Hey, Dan. I gather from your final answer to the larger group that you're opposed to California and other blue states retaliating for red state gerrymandering. What's your current view? I mean, we have this conversation frequently on this part of the show. What's your current view about the status of the overall threat to democracy? And I know, and as part of that, and in response to that other answer, you said you preferred to kind of work to try to achieve kind of more bipartisan ways of dealing with issues and not attacking democracy. Where do you see any significant Republican effort at bipartisanship, particularly not so much even on some substantive issues, but on the issues of things like elections and control of the House and even their reaction to the courts? Because, you know, please enlighten me. I don't see it.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, I actually wrote my weekly column this Monday on this very matter, and I just put the link to it in the chat box if any of you decide
good.
that you to read it later. But I'll simply just read the first two sentences. It can be argued that allowing politicians to create their own districts was like letting teenagers set their own curfews. Even if everyone begins the evening with the noblest of goals, it's inevitable that as the hour gets late, personal self-interest will always take precedence over high-minded good intentions. So I've been working on redistricting issues for 35 years now. This is something that's really important to me. Politicians should not pick their voters. Voters should pick their politicians. And I think what Trump and his allies in Texas are doing is reprehensible. But I think what Newsom and his allies are doing here in California is just as inexcusable. To your point about bipartisanship, it appears now that the campaign against the initiative will be run not by MAGA Republicans, but be led by Arnold Schwarzenegger, the nominally Republican former governor. Now, Schwarzenegger has no love for Trump. He's made it clear publicly he didn't vote for him. But what Schwarzenegger is saying, and what, to their credit, the League of Women Voters are saying, is my words, not theirs. The best way to save democracy is not to further undermine it.
Is what?
There is a Republican House member in Northern California by the name of Kevin Kiley, whose district will almost certainly be eliminated by the measure that Newsom is putting on the ballot this fall. Kiley, for obviously totally self-interested reasons, has introduced a bill in Congress that would require every state to turn its redistricting over to a citizens commission. And I believe that in most states, that initiative, if it were on the ballot, would pass. So I understand why Trump's opponents see this as a logical pushback. And for all the differences of opinion I have with Gavin Newsom, I understand what his goals are, even if I don't agree with the way he's seeking to achieve them. But I don't believe that further debasing our institutions does help save them. In fact, I think it makes a bad situation worse. That means that even when Trump has left office in 2029 and his successor has left office in 2033, we need to put this democracy back together. And I'm just not comfortable being complicit in weakening it even further.
Can I just do a quick follow-up?
Of course.
I think one of the problems with, I first of all, I would absolutely support Kiley's bill that all states should have to have independent redistricting commissions, because then we wouldn't be having this debate and democracy would be strengthened everywhere. And this particular assault would not be able to go. But given that we don't see any, in other words, that's absolutely that bill is never going to come up for a vote in the House. And so the problem, Dan, is that what if there isn't a change in administration in 2028? And this kind of thing is leading towards an authoritarian, unfair, rigged election. And I think that as much as I agree with the idealism behind what you're saying, that kind of analysis reminds me of kind of, German Democrats between, 1928 and 1933. I think you're underestimating the threat. So I'd be curious obviously, of course, I respect your opinion. I'd love to hear your response to that.
Well, as all of you in this smaller group know, as I've admitted to you from time to time, I don't think particularly highly of the president on all sorts of fronts. I think that's shined through in our previous conversations. That said, even as someone who considers himself a very strong critic of Trump, as I think I've told you before, Rick, I'm not comfortable with Nazi Germany parallels. Yeah, my wife and I serve on the board of directors of the Holocaust Museum of Los Angeles. I have a photo of my grandfather as a child with his 7 siblings in Ukraine. And 4 of his siblings, he and 3 of his siblings left to come to the US in the late 1930s. The other 4 decided to wait. And of course, they never made it out. So even as an extraordinarily strong partisan critic of this president, I'm not comfortable with the parallels. All that said, I believe that this redistricting can have a marginal benefit for Trump. It sounds to me like we're talking purely practical politics here. Well, I don't think it's as sweeping a victory as he thinks it is. What the Texas maps do is, in order to create new potentially Republican districts, they're making existing Republican districts more competitive.
Right.
Every one of those 5 new districts relies on the same percentage of Latino voters that supported Trump last November, supporting a Republican for Congress in November of 2026. I don't think those things are likely to occur. I've come to believe out. And I know we're spending a lot more time on this, but I think it's extremely important, and I appreciate you guys sticking with me through it.
Of course.
It sounds like I'm changing the subject, but I'm going to tell you a quick story about my experience on Senator McCain's campaign way back in 2000. As many of you know, I was his communications director. And in that campaign, one of the reasons I went to work for him, aside from his belief in campaign finance reform, as he had committed to a different type of campaigning. He wasn't going to go negative on his opponents. He wasn't going to seek out big money special interests. Well, what I learned that year is it's really easy to be noble when you're at 2% in the polls. And as we started to move up and the stakes got more real, there became increasingly pressure on him and on us to abandon those high-minded principles in order to campaign in a more competitive way. So finally, we put up a negative ad in South Carolina. It wasn't even that negative, but it was a criticism of McCain criticizing Bush. And I still remember one of our leading congressional supporters, somebody who I held and still hold in extremely high regard, came into my office. He said, "You idiots, you morons." And I said, "Senator, look, someone says that to me every day. You're supposed to be more specific." And he said, "How could you put up that ad? How could you put up that negative ad?" And I said, "Look, it wasn't great. We had to rush it out onto the air." And he said, "You don't understand." He said, "Over the last several months, the voters of this country had been putting John McCain up on a pedestal. They'd seen him as something different and something better. In a 30-second ad, you've knocked that pedestal right out from under him. Now he's just another career politician throwing mud at other career politicians." And Rick, our campaign never recovered, because that advice was exactly right. He was no longer the reformer. He was no longer the change agent. He no longer stood for something better. He was just one more craven politician willing to get down in the mud to achieve whatever it was his goals were. And the lesson I took us away from that a quarter of a century ago was, if you sink to that level and sacrifice the voters' trust, it's not that easy to win it back.
Well, thank
So
you.
I would take my chances winning over Latino swing voters in Southern Texas rather than sacrificing those principles.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. So meanwhile, though, Rick, you and I managed to hijack almost a full half of our post-game show.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take up that much time.
As
Sorry.
you can tell, it's a subject that's incredibly important to me. And I know how busy you all are, but I hope you'll take the time to read the column. It looks like the Johnsons have a question, though. They've been very patient throughout mine and Rick's kidnapping.
So, Dan, if you would please gaze into your crystal ball and tell me who is going to be the Democratic governor candidate for California.
Wow. So Carol, as you know, for 5 years now, I've been saying I don't make predictions. And it's not because I think they're shallow. It's just because whenever I make them, I tend to be wrong. And I think I've told this group, I gave up making predictions in public forever in November 2016. I've since learned my lesson, but I will say this. I would say that a field without Kamala Harris, I think is good for the Democrats. And I say that not as criticism of Harris, but just as an acknowledgement that to many voters, she, fairly or otherwise, represents the past. And I think that her not running requires the Democratic Party to turn to its future in a way that it might not have otherwise with a previous, with a prohibited frontrunner. I'll offer you this. I think that Representative Porter, I think that Katie Porter is a front runner now only because of her name recognition from the Senate race last year. I don't think she's ahead in this race at all. The polls just reflect that more people know her name. I feel if you want to watch, it's a very broad field. I'll tell you who to keep an eye on. I'll keep an eye on Tony Atkins, the former state Senate leader. She would be the first LGBTQ governor in California's history. That's not the reason to vote for her, but it's just something worth keeping in mind and would motivate a sizable portion of the Democratic electorate. I would, and I say this as somebody who just talked about the future, I'd say keep an eye on Antonio Villaraigosa. He's certainly the oldest of the candidates. He's in his 70s, but he knows how to run and he knows how to win. He's a very smart guy, and he is probably the most centrist of the Democrats in the race. And on issues like housing and homelessness and crime, might be better positioned to reach out to independents than some of the more progressive members. And of course, the wild card is Rick Caruso, who, as some of you know, of course, ran unsuccessfully for mayor of Los Angeles a few years ago. If you remember, Caruso ran for mayor and lost only a few months after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. I think that Caruso lost that mayor's race because of the Roe v. Wade court decision. If you were to run for mayor or governor next year, it looks like he'll run for one or the other. I think he'll be a much more formidable candidate.
You're
How's
gonna,
that for a long-winded way? I have no idea.
Lieutenant Governor,
I'm sorry?
you're gonna skip the Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I'm not skipping the lieutenant governor. She skipped herself. Alani Kunalak has dropped out of the governor's race this week. She's running for state treasurer instead. And I think that was a smart decision on her. Just like Gavin Newsom first ran for governor briefly before running for lieutenant governor. I think she might benefit, having never held elective office before this one, from holding another constitutional office before running for governor in the future.
News to me.
That's why you tune in, right? Good questions?
Don't see, I guess we've got, oh, we have actually a different question in the chat I can get to down here. Let's see, this is John's question. Wait, I'm not skipping any, am I? No. John's question in here. It says, yes, here in Florida, alligator Alcatraz is a major issue. Do you see this becoming a national issue or does it remain local?
Well, it's a great question, John. And I think it does become, I think it already has become a national issue. The question is not whether it's a national issue or not, but which way it comes. You know, we know that throughout the campaign last year, and for years before that, immigration was the issue on which Trump enjoyed his strongest base of support. He's no longer in positive territory on immigration policy. I think the main reason for that is that while Trump often says that he wants to only remove criminals from this country, there's increasing evidence that those who have not committed any crime other than that of residency are being held and in many cases deported, and that's turning public attention against him. So if the Trump administration were to be sufficiently disciplined to make sure that only convicted criminals of violent crimes were sent to live in very harsh conditions in the Everglades at this prison camp, they'd probably enjoy majority support in this country on that question, even if those standards are, those living standards are exceedingly harsh. But as information comes out, that not only the residents of this particular facility, but more broadly, those being held, have not been accused or convicted of a violent crime, then I think it has the potential to work against him nationally. But as we were talking about earlier in our districting conversation, if Trump wants those 5 House seats in Texas, Republican House members need to win Latinos at the same level that Trump did last year. And Latino voters are simply not supporting Trump at that level anymore, given how aggressive he has been on immigration-related policy. So it definitely is a national issue, but we'll see over the next year who benefits and who's hurt. Jennifer, you can't tell me for a minute that you don't have a question bouncing around in your head.
Actually, Rick really did cover my most pressing question, and I'm glad to have heard from you about it. Thanks, Dan.
The reason I called her out, everyone, is not just because I thought Jennifer would have a smart question, but for those of you who don't know, Jennifer Poulakidis, I'm so sorry. Poulakidis, correct?
That's it.
Anyway, Jennifer is the head of government relations at UCLA. And I know you've all been reading the news this week, and I don't know anybody in the state of California who has had a more challenging week and whose success we should be invested in more than we are in Jennifer and her colleagues. So
thank you, Dan.
Thank you for keeping up that fight for all of us. It means a lot to us, Jennifer.
Thank you, Dan.
You're even getting applause. Okay.
I don't see any other questions or hands up right now.
I bet Natalie has one before we go.
I actually don't have one. I can't think of one right now.
Okay, then Rick, you get the last one.
Hoover, look in the chat, Jeff Hoover.
Oh,
Did I miss Jeff's question? Oh, yes, my apologies, Jeff. Did skip that. It says, yes, immigration enforcement is having clear economic impacts on agriculture in the Midwest. As will Trump trade increases for, oh, okay, will the Trump trade deal increase for sellers and buyers? I guess specifically, we were talking about that a little bit earlier with agriculture and
Jeff, I think your instinct on this is exactly right. Not only will the tariffs drive inflation, but so will the ICE and DHS immigration crackdowns. Because those sectors that have a disproportionate number of undocumented workers are agriculture, which makes food prices go up, construction, which makes housing prices go up, oil and gas exploration, which makes energy prices go up, and service and hospitality, which makes travel prices go up. So if you wanted a recipe without tariffs to increase inflation, a crackdown like this is a pretty effective way of driving it.
This is deep red territory, and people are really noticing the problems.
Jeff, where were you in Iowa?
North Central.
Where?
Near Mason City. Went to college in Northeast Iowa.
I will, I'm a bit south of you, but I will tell you, next time you're back, if you have a chance to go a bit further south, the best Mexican food in the country, says somebody who lives in Los Angeles, the best Mexican food I've ever had in my entire life is in North Platte, Nebraska.
The people who run what was my parents' family business are having a terrible time finding labor. They always relied on local labor, and they can't find it. They're recruiting it. They brought people in from South Africa last year on the seasonal business.
And And
And
if
it's
you
just,
voted, oh, I'm
it's just
sorry.
everybody is having the same problem, and it's crippling the industries that tie to agriculture. You know, the parking plant in Omaha that was raided a month or so ago hasn't reopened because of lack of staff and things like that. How long can Trump hold when
Well-
he has so much of his support from red agricultural states?
Well, as Natalie and Brianna will tell you, this was originally going to be our first topic of tonight's webinar before the summit got scheduled. But I would say this, if you've noticed, Trump is beginning to hear from the agribusiness and the hospitality industry in particular, but also from construction and manufacturing, that this is not sustainable for them economically. So when you do see Trump making noises, he's thinking out loud about some type of compromise on these issues, it's coming from his base. You're exactly right, from deep red America. And I think far more than Democrats pushing for immigration reform, if Trump ever does sign off on even a limited type of reform, it will be because he's hearing about it from the farmers and from the growers and from the hotel owners.
The first time I voted, there was a neighbor who was the town clerk for the elections. She didn't even ask me what political party I belonged to. She just handed me the Republican ballot.
Yeah, Jeff, I came from the same small town in Wisconsin. We'll have to compare notes at some point. Thanks, everybody. As always, I really enjoy it, and thank you for taking the time for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
See you
Dan.
soon.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thanks,
Yes,
Madison.
enjoy your
Thank you,
vacation.
Madison.
And thank you for giving us always a nonpartisan approach. I know I and others really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks.